Alrighty, shalom and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of Brutal Planet right here on KKVV 1060 AM, WKLV in Atlanta, and on Pardis Radio. Joined with us here today, we have a special panel. As a matter of fact, we got Marty Hertz, who is the editor of the Rabbinic Gospel of Mark, and we also have Rabbi Asher Meza as well. Shalom, guys.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
And Rabbi Asher and I, we actually had a little bit of a discussion the other day that was supposed to be recorded, and we had some technical issues. So we're going to try and recreate that to the best of our abilities here today. Well, first of all, before we get into that, how about if we have both of you guys go and give a little bit of background here, and we'll start out with Marty first, and then go on to Rabbi Meza.
Well, my name is Marty Hertz. I am a believer in the Mashiach. I also am a Jew, and those two labels or viewpoints seem to have coalesced nicely, starting back in about 1997.
Okay, and Rabbi Meza.
Okay, my name is Asher Meza. I run an organization called BeJewish.org, also Torah Judaism International. I'm an Orthodox Jew that does not believe Yeshua is the Messiah, although I am not for excluding Messianics that do, or Jewish believers that do. I also encourage people to consider converting to Judaism, full Torah Judaism, and I look forward to a very interesting talk today with my two brothers.
Excellent. Well, we're really excited about it, and actually, let's kind of just jump right into the crux of the matter. And by the way, I want to let everybody know, considering that we had originally gone and recorded something for Rabbi Meza, which we didn't get the recording of, sadly. We did set up a promotional thing for 10% off from people who are viewers of Rabbi Meza's YouTube videos and people who follow him on social media and all that stuff. So if you want to get 10% off the Rabbinic Gospel of Mark, which Marty and I actually worked together on and put together, you can get a 10% off discount by going to rabbinicgospels.org and going and putting in the code Meza, which is Rabbi Meza's last name, of course, and the number 10, Meza 10, you get 10% off of the Rabbinic Gospel of Mark. All right, so basically the crux of the matter here is I think our entire conversation dealt with this concept of Yeshua being the Messiah the last time Rabbi Meza and I had spoken, and he brought up some things that were concerning to him, and let's just go and just jump right on into that. Rabbi Meza, go ahead and mention. Just start out with one of the things
Sure.
that you found concerning.
I said initially that I don't exclude Jewish believers in Yeshua as full Jews because the Torah doesn't exclude them. In the same way that the Torah doesn't exclude anyone who either chooses to believe or not believe in the Messiah. So why do Messianics then choose to exclude or label Jews who do not accept Yeshua as incomplete, as in some way not pleasing to the Almighty because of their decision to not accept an individual as the Messiah, when the Torah does not mention the concept of the Messiah? Now, someone could say there are certain foreshadowings that appear in Torah that point to some Messiah. That's fine. However, there's no literal command to either believe or not believe in the Messiah, at least in Torah Shebektav on the Peshat level. And we know that we could only really exclude people for breaking Torah commands, for not believing a Torah principle. Chris and I got into a back and forth on where is there an actual necessity in Torah to believe in Yeshua as the Messiah. And if there's no explicit verse, chapter, area in the 5 books that requires one to do so, on what basis does Messianic Judaism exclude Orthodox Jews as not being validated by the Almighty?
Now, first of all, I can say that for myself, I don't personally exclude Orthodox Jews as being part of the chosen people of God. Absolutely not. I know that you've come in contact with quite a few who have, and I often relate to the prophecy in Zechariah that says, in the end days you'll pull on the tzitzit of a Jew and say, teach us, for we know that Hashem is with you. I think that in many ways, in the Messianic faith and in the Hebrew roots, there's a sense of this need of validation that is often associated with these individuals at times that go and say, you need to see things the way I see it. You need to say the four-letter name of God the way that I say it. You need to, have this exact same halachot that I have, and don't go beyond that. I see that a great deal of the time we have individuals who are on a very rocky foundation who take this kind of approach at times. And maybe Marty has a different idea, or maybe even a different explanation there. What do you say, Marty?
Well, first of all, I concur 100%. No one should be excluded any more than the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes that came out with the Israelites out of Mitzrayim, out of the land of Egypt. Their only caveat was they needed to obey the commandments when they were given. Or to be given, and similarly with Father Abraham, who through his obedience was considered a tzaddik or righteous. But I do want to address, by way of example, whereas I would agree with you, Rabbi, there may not be at the Peshat level a specific verse telling us that we must believe in a Mashiach in order to participate in the blessings that come with keeping Torah. But I'd like to share with the audience Shmot, Exodus. Chapter 14, verse 13, and I'll read the significant parts of that verse in English and then in Hebrew because it's very significant. Okay, and Moses said unto the people, the background. This is, of course, when the Red Sea was about to be parted and certain death was imminent if they could not get away from the marauding Egyptians. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Almighty. And in Hebrew, as I say, it's even more significant. V'yomer Moshe el ha'am al tira'u Hidyatzavu u'ra'u et, here it comes, Yeshuat Hashem. So, whereas this does not necessarily portend a commandment to believe in a Mashiach, for those of us who believe the way we do, it basically mentions him by name. So, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, it mentions him by name because the name Yeshua just means salvation. But we know that every time, at least from a literal perspective, that the notion or the idea of salvation appears in Tanakh, it means a physical salvation. A great example that you just gave, right? A salvation from the Egyptians. The salvation that appears in Isaiah is a salvation from the Assyrians. It never really translates to a heavenly salvation. Now, I believe in a heavenly salvation, but I don't think the Torah requires me to believe in one. And the only thing the Torah requires me to believe in terms of being validated by the Almighty as one of his people is that there is one true God, and he gave the Torah to his people, and he requires his people to keep his Torah. That's it. Now, if there's a commandment that's in the Torah, one must keep it. However, if there is a commandment that's not in the Torah, not only are we not required to keep it, we cannot exclude others on that basis. And I really admire you two individuals for the love you have for the Jewish people because it's evident. However, I think you have that love in spite of what appears in the New Testament because the authors of the New Testament do not share that same sentiment. New Testament is clear that he who has the Son has the life. Right? That Jesus himself said that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. You need Yeshua in order to be validated by the Almighty and all that entails. So I'm not sure how you justify your acceptance of the Jewish people who have not accepted Yeshua as fully Jewish and part of God's plan when the New Testament doesn't.
Well, let me go and touch upon that one. In Judaism, we don't see any need for that of an intercessory. But however, we do see that we are relying upon a mediator. We see this through Aharon and through Moshe Rabbeinu. We see this in
through every prophet,
Hasidus.
pretty much, I would say.
Yeah, we see this through in Hasidus even today through Rebbe Nachman and through that of Schneerson on the other side of the bench there. Neither one of these organizations have replaced their Rebbe, and so but we see that their teachings and so on, they are things that basically make up what is Chabad, what is Breslev, and so on and so forth. And so with this, when Yeshua makes this statement, we have to understand who it is his Talmudim were. And his Talmudim were individuals such as, tax collectors, fishermen. These were individuals who probably did not have a Rebbe. They didn't, and I think we see this very, very evident in some of during the time of the gospel, some of the immaturity within that of Kepha. He later grows after he, gets beaten down a couple of times. But, we kind of tend to see where these guys are at spiritually at this time. Mm-hmm. And, with that, we see them start to mature. And just like the Chabadniks, just like the individuals of Breslev, we see, the believers in Yeshua going and carrying on the traditions that Yeshua had taught, a great deal of which are found within that of Parash Bialpeh. In my personal opinion.
But at least in regards to Chabad and Breslev, I've always said that Messianic Judaism really seems like another form of Kabbalistic Judaism. However, the difference with Messianic Judaism and Hasidut is that Chabad and Breslev do not exclude you from the fold just because you don't believe their Rebbe's the Messiah or you choose not to dance to Rebbe Nachman music. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. They're the ones who've really pushed the Kiruv movement, the outreach movement that we see happening today of including all Jews. Now, mind you, they do have a double standard. They'll accept if you're an atheist, but not a Messianic. But in terms of Messianic Judaism being as accepting as Chabad and Breslev, I don't see it.
I think a great deal of the time, especially in social media and with individuals who are young in their faith, as I had mentioned before, these are individuals that are seeking out validation. And I've seen it at times. People who are young Chabadniks, for instance, you go and you give any sort of thing, in contradiction to that of Menachem Mendel Schneerson, and they will jump all over you. But then, the elder has to come in and take that person, push them aside, and said, sorry about this guy. He's, very zealous, yet.
So you're not condoning that behavior.
Like that. Say what?
So you're not condoning that behavior, because that's a similarity you said that it had with Messianic Judaism.
Yeah, well, I'm saying we have the same issue at times, but it shouldn't be a reflection upon everyone.
Yeah, but the difference is that sentiment is not in our source material, but it is in your source material. Yeah. In other words, it appears in the New Testament. It doesn't appear in the Torah. The Torah says that by Jews keeping Torah, the nations will look and say, what a wise and discerning people, i.e. that we should join them, not push away. As a matter of fact, it seems that the Torah is trying to do the opposite. It's trying to bring the world to this ethical, rational, monotheistic ideal, while Christianity says that if you don't have the Son, you don't have the life. And it even goes further in the book of Revelation and calls Jews who do not embrace Yeshua as those belonging to the synagogue of Satan, whatever that may actually mean. So
I would say in terms of this, you liken Messianic Judaism to that of Kabbalism, and I see a great deal of that. I think you're absolutely correct in that. So therefore, when somebody says that, that the Yeshua is HaChaim, I then say to myself, okay, well, what essentially does that mean? Let's take that on the Kabbalistic level. Let's take that to the levels of the 5 levels of the Shoah, the Chaya, the Neshama, the
But I don't have a problem with that statement. The problem I have is saying, and no one comes to the Father but through me. There's many people. I mean, Chabad teaches that the Rebbe is the Atzmut in a Guf, the divine essence in bodily form. That really doesn't bother me as much as someone saying that you cease to please the Almighty for reasons not detailed in Torah, right? I mean, the Torah tells us how we please the Almighty. He says that you keep my chukim and my mishpatim, my laws, my edicts. That's how you please the Almighty. and we displease him by not keeping those commandments. But suddenly Christianity comes and sets another parameter that now, apart from keeping commandments, at least from a messianic perspective, now you have to believe that someone was born from a virgin, died for your sins, and is coming back again. In other words, I've always thought that too much faith is a bad thing because it allows you to justify foreign ideas that really, in this case, are antithetical to Torah. So,
may I
sure.
jump in at this point? Or okay.
Yeah.
We have to separate what, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say misinterpretive or misguided Christianity has to say vis-a-vis the interpretation of that statement. No one comes to the Father but by me. The bigger platitude or the bigger statement that Yeshua made or was made of him was that he kept all of Torah perfectly. Okay, so there's external sources that comment and validate on that, which we probably don't have time for at the moment. But the whole idea was he was saying, do as I do, keep Torah. And through keeping Torah is the way that you come to the Father. So in other words, it's not what they say he said means, it's what he meant by what he said. And go to the source, not what is said of him. And I think that changes the outlook a little bit.
Now, this is not only in the Gospels. Paul reiterates this notion with the idea that every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess, and the idea that Jesus kept the Torah fully. Don't forget, Jesus didn't have children. He didn't fulfill the mitzvah of provu. He wasn't married. He actually lied. He said, this generation shall not pass away till you see the Son of Man coming in the clouds. This idea that he kept Torah fully, I know you believe this in faith, but I think from a Torah perspective, he sinned like everyone else sinned. First of all, well, that wasn't even a requirement that someone had to keep the Torah perfectly. Torah is clear that one should not say that the Torah is up in heaven lest someone say who's going to go up and get it. It's right in front of you. It's doable. In other words, perfection is not the goal. The goal is to make good men better, ultimately, and make this world a better place. That's what I think, and I've always taught that. The Torah... Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, indeed, to strive to keep, let's be kind, as many commandments as are applicable to you. Obviously there are some pertaining only to men. There are some pertaining only to women, and please help us. There's quite a few concerning the forgiveness of sins through the korbanot, which we can't do.
Correct.
So that's an ongoing problem, unless for a moment we assume that perhaps the Almighty's plan in the first place, since he exists outside of time, would certainly have not been blindsided by any of this, knowing that in the future at some point the temple would be destroyed. Perhaps there needed to be some mechanism for forgiveness of chatim, and perhaps this was it. And as far as every knee shall bow and every eye shall see him, that hasn't happened yet. It may never happen, but if and when it does, then I guess we'll know. So in the meantime, we don't need to fight and kill each other over that aspect, which is kind of what Chris and I often talk about, enjoy, and advocate.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, Marty and I disagree on many things, and some of the things, areas where him and I disagree. Most people we would end up seeing slitting each other's throats over social media. But and that's what's
great about this conversation, by the way, that we could disagree and we could still love each other. But
exactly.
I have a question for Marty. Marty, sure. You said that there are some commandments that only apply to men, some commandments that only apply to women, Kohanim, some commandments that only apply in Eretz Yisrael. And you implied that because you're a male, you don't have to keep those commandments that apply only to women and vice versa. However, when you mentioned sacrifices, you said that was an ongoing problem. Instead of saying, because we don't have a temple, those sacrifices also don't apply. But for some reason, that's where the New Testament came in and said, no, this God had to rectify. Why don't you also say that one day God's going to make you a female and allow you to keep all the commandments that were only applicable to women, or in some way God's going to make you a Cohen so you can keep all those commandments as well? I think this is a point that the Messianic world misses, that if you're not able to keep a commandment because God put you in this position, God put us in Galut. That's why we don't have a temple and we can't bring korbanot. This is why we don't sacrifice, not because we choose not to. So this idea, because we don't sacrifice in some way, there had to be a supernatural sacrifice for us to be able to fulfill those areas of Torah and Halakha. Why doesn't that also apply, again, to those other commandments we can't do for whatever reason?
I understand what you're saying, and I guess it becomes, what came first, the chicken or the egg in that scenario. It's like, well, we would love to be obedient, we would love to do korbanot, but we can't, and it's whether that's because we're in exile or because there is no temple and there's no Kohen Gadol at the moment. Those are more compelling reasons why we don't, and let me rephrase it, why we don't get to keep those halachot at this point.
Well, you can offer sacrifices without a Kohen Gadol.
True,
for example,
but I mean,
but the Passover sacrifice could be offered today, and just go up to the Har Bayit and do it. Now that's getting political, but there's some problems. But I mean, to do the more overreaching deal, I'm no apologist for the Messianic movement. It has its own issues, just the same as if you're familiar with this open orthodoxy thing that's advocating for women to be rabbis and all this other nonsense, catering some kind of political correct feminist idiocy. Sorry, I'll go on record as that's my opinion on that one. I'm a conservative as well.
Okay.
I'm a conservative with a small c, not a conservative Jew, but a right-wing Republican.
But let me explain quickly for your audience. A lot of the thing, the whole point was there's Kehilat, Am Yisrael. Anyone else who comes, it comes to be joined into Am Yisrael, to participate. I mean, there wasn't any specific provision, although Chris and I may or may not agree on the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, but that's another story or for another day. But it's that others, outsiders, if you will, for lack of a better word, are supposed to come through their faith, obedience, wanting to do halachot and everything else. And they then grafted in, according to the New Testament, into Am Yisrael. The problem with a lot of in the Messy movement is a sort of smug, misplaced superiority that somehow, because of their Christian background or something like that, as predicated as belief in Yeshua as Mashiach, that somehow makes them better. And if you don't conform to our man-made written rules and policies, then of course your salvation is at risk. Which I don't really hold to that. The whole key is being pointed to and embracing our Creator, our Father, and if the vehicle to get to there and to get to Torah obedience is through a Mashiach, and if that Mashiach indeed was Yeshua, I ended up where I needed to be, regardless of how I got there. And I feel that's the most important issue.
So you would admit that one has to believe in this Mashiach?
Well, personally, I believe so. But I'm not going to inflict that edict under penalty of death on others. I mean, it's like anything else. It's not for everyone.
I mean, that's kind of goes against the Great Commission of going into the world and making disciples of all nations. I mean, it seems that the New Testament takes a different attitude to how they view the Jew. Right.
Well, there is real quickly on that. There is some scholarly dispute as to whether that line, quote unquote, the Great Commission, was actually in some of the older or original texts, where in some of them it was not. Pardon?
Is it in the Peshitta?
I don't I don't recall if it was in there or not, and I apologize.
Okay. Well,
Yeshua himself said the prophets, the law and the writings testify to him, and that's what God is going to use to justify or to condemn those who don't accept Yeshua. Clearly, the New Testament requires one to accept Yeshua in order to find favor in God's eyes. Now, mind you, there's as much pushing away done in the Orthodox world. I know Orthodox Jews don't accept Messianic believers, like full Jews, even if they're born Jewish, right? But that doesn't mean that we have to emulate that hatred. I'm here on public radio saying that I accept you as long as you keep Torah Shebiktav and Torah Shebal-Peh. The Torah is what unites us. We shouldn't let other ideas, other hashkafic ideas, separate us. You understand?
Exactly.
Now, go ahead.
Chris, I think you were about to say something.
Oh yeah. I was gonna make note about that passage. If it does or if it does not appear, and Marty and I are both big fans of the Peshitta. We believe that the Kibburis Codex is the oldest text of the New Testament, and it follows the same thing in terms of the Hebrew Tanakh in terms of structure and everything, and also theology based upon that God forbid Kabbalistic ideal, that there are things within the letters and the words, and that there's the Hebrew text is three-dimensional, and so therefore Greek can never be three-dimensional like Aramaic can, because Aramaic is indeed a Semitic language. But despite that, the thing with that passage, if it does indeed appear within that of the Kibburis Codex, I would say this: that first of all, what we have happening here at this time, especially during the times of Paul, is we see people coming to the Messiah and to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through that of the Messiah from the nations. Now, we all of us know that the word goy in Hebrew is the word for nation. It's also the name of an individual who's a Gentile, but a heathen Gentile, which is different than that of a ger. So to have these heathens, therefore, in many ways, for lack of a better term, converted into a belief into the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we see this happening all over this region during this time by places like Rome, Galatia, Corinth, all of these places that really didn't have much of a Jewish population at this time. And we can look throughout today's modern time and see that we have 2.5 billion people on the face of the planet going and worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They may not do it in the form that it is that we ascribe, being that of a way of following the mitzvos of Hashem. And I think a lot of that gets into, first of all, worldview, cultural differences, and all of these matters at the same time.
I'd like to add to this. Hold on, I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
If the goal was bringing the nations to the God of Israel and ultimately to his Torah, then it seems that because the Messianic movement is maybe around 35 years old, it took them around 2,000 years, and mind you, the Messianic movement is probably one of the smallest branches of Christianity. It took them 2,000 years from where they would have gotten in one day if Paul would have been preaching Torah Judaism instead of Nazarene Judaism. In other words, it seems that Paul and the writings of Paul actually hurt more than they helped the church, because the church for 2,000 years has been persecuting Jews, has been persecuting Christians. I mean, the Catholics and the Protestants. It seems that if the converted Gentile believers would have just cut out the middleman, would have just cut out Paul, would have just cut out Yeshua and just stuck with Torah, they would have been a lot better off. Don't you think?
Well, here's the thing with this. Peter says, many people twist the words of Paul to their own destruction. And this reminds me of, I've seen people very young in their walk go and start to pick up the Zohar. Now about 11 years into my walk, and I just now started going and studying these texts. So I know that Rabbi Meza is against these texts. But however, I can see the issue with these texts and being able to properly understand and read these texts, because I'm barely able to get maybe probably about 10% out of all the pages that it is that I read of the Zohar. Now, I put Paul on a very high midrashic level of, things, just barely below that of the level of Kabbalism within that of Zohar. Now, would you go and drop these texts on individuals who are unlearned, who don't know, things going on in the first century? They don't know the history. They don't know the culture. They don't know the idiomatic expression. They don't understand any of these things. And what happens is we have people going and building doctrines upon maybe a line or two of Paul and not talking about, wait a minute here, why is it that he says this here? But then he says this in another place that seems to be a contradiction, and they don't realize that these are a couple of different audiences, first of all, with different regions, different cultural expression, different laws within their very own society. And in many ways, and don't take this in the negative, but however, different classes of people, not in terms of monetary, but in terms of their experiences, different things in which it is that they are able to fulfill based upon the things that they might be under, so a lot of these things play into that. And so with that, in order for us to understand, these high levels of Jewish texts that were, oral for generations after generation, we have to be able to understand these things on an appropriate level to properly interpret them. Would you not say?
Well, first of all, I have no problem with a Messianic Jew or even an Orthodox Jew viewing the New Testament or the teachings of Paul on the level of Midrashim, or even on the level of the Zohar. Now, the difference is that Jews do not exclude other Jews on the basis of Midrashim or on the pages of the Zohar. Right. So it's really a non sequitur. You're not comparing apples with apples here. The New Testament is your source material on the level of the Torah. In other words, it guides the vast majority of Christians more than the Torah does. Christians elevate letters that Paul wrote to his friends right up there next to the book of Exodus and the book of Deuteronomy. So we're not comparing the Zohar really with the New Testament because it's not an authoritative text on that level. In other words, you could accept parts of the Zohar from a devotional perspective and it could speak to you and it could be beautiful in your eyes, but you can't at the same time exclude someone for not seeing what you see. However, the Torah is clear cut. It's kind of hard for someone to mangle its words. This is why when people start new religions and cults, they almost never use the Torah. They usually base it on hyperbole that's found in the prophets. And if it's in the Christian world, it's typically done with a King James version in archaic English, just because their goal is to deceive or to insert their ideas and get it canonized with the pen of divine inspiration. So this is why it's really not analogous to compare to the Zohar or Midrashim. As a matter of fact, if I've used... Go ahead.
Well, let's take it to a scriptural level then. All three of us can agree that Ezekiel and Jeremiah are biblical texts, right?
They're prophetic texts, but the job of the prophets and the books of the prophets are only to amplify Torah and not to bring people to their teachings or to some new understanding.
Of course. But also at the same time, Jeremiah and Ezekiel are butting heads with one another in their own books. Now, the thing with this is we say to ourselves, do we then have to choose Ezekiel or Jeremiah? Asher Shalom, God forbid. God forbid that we should have to do such a thing. Instead, we see an vantage point from two different Torah observant lenses, if you will, from two individuals who see things slightly differently from the other one. So therefore, that helps us in terms of our historical understanding. and also helps us in many ways to see things from a different point of view. There's an old midrashim between the rabbis that, they're arguing how many proper interpretations there are to each and every single line of Torah. One rabbi says there's 7 of them. One says there's 32. The final rabbi stands up and he says enough. There's an unlimited amount based upon what it is that the Bas Chol, the voice from heaven, or Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, wishes to show you at that time.
Here, the difference is that we don't use the books of the prophets to help us understand Torah. In other words, we're able to understand Torah. The books of the prophets are there to bring us back to Torah. So only because a prophet may in some way disagree with another prophet does not in any way affect someone's final destination. Right? I mean,
of course,
in the Jewish world, no one quotes Jeremiah and says, because Jeremiah says this, I'm going to interpret the Torah that way. As a matter of fact, I mean, the Torah never says that it's really left up for us to interpret it. It tells us that in areas of controversy that we have to look at the judges of those days, and their instructions will be Torah to us. So I've always had this problem with the Karaite movement.
Oh, gosh.
That when they elevate the books of the prophets and the writings right along next to the Torah, when these books were compiled or sometimes even written by the men of the Great Assembly themselves in the time of Ezra, right? I mean, these individuals never thought that someone would be building doctrine off the hyperbole found in those books. No, but those books only exist to give us a historical account of the life and times of that prophet and how God acted throughout history, to instill fear into us, to bring us back to Torah in whatever generation. So, I mean, to say that only because there's some inconsistency between Jeremiah and Daniel and Yehezkel doesn't mean that on that inconsistency we're going to exclude Jews who never use those texts as a basis to understand Torah. I mean, the Torah is pretty clear-cut, right? I mean, it's not that complicated. And the parts that are or seem complicated, we don't exclude others on. I think the other day you quoted Rabbeinu Bachia, who said that God does not condemn individuals for not being able to see what's not literally there, or for not being able to see for lack of education or whatever.
And Paul said the same thing, as a matter of fact, in Eger Romani.
Yeah, I never said Paul is evil, and I never said Yeshua was evil. I'm just saying that we shouldn't use those books to build a new religion and to exclude others by. But, however, I've always said that Messianic Judaism reformed is Messianic Judaism no longer. Because if those books don't separate, then why do we need Jesus then? If someone could please the Almighty just by keeping Torah, just by what the Torah says, it says that if you keep my Torah, I will bless you, and on and on. It appears many times in the Torah. If that's all it takes, then why do we need Yeshua?
You know, and you bring up an amazing point as well, is that the fact that, take for instance, I know for myself, and I'm sure for Marty as well, we talk with individuals who are in Orthodox Judaism all the time, but we don't do it like sitting there saying, I'm hell bent on going and bringing this person to Yeshua. That's not what it's about for us. These are our friends. We are considered a part of these people, and we're considered to be, amachad with these people. And all that stuff. And I think that a lot of times, again, it comes down to, certain individuals within our faith who think that they are, that they're, gladiators, if you will, that are within our faith, that is, they're trying to convert them to their own style of, as you say, Reformed Messianic Judaism in many ways. And however, we find this to be the absolute wrong approach, and now me, on the other hand, I see Yeshua as the Messiah on a higher level than most people in my very own faith, yet still at the same time, I, don't go out there, when I go to an Orthodox shul, I don't sit in there with the idea, I'm going to go and convert somebody today, to my way of belief.
But do you feel they need converting?
No. I think that first of all, it's.
So then why do you need Yeshua then? I mean, why do you need Yeshua if they don't need converting? Now, the Torah itself excludes, and it proudly excludes idolaters, gratuitous sinners, people who fight against God, indecent individuals, right? On that basis, we can exclude. But on who the Messiah is or is not a basis to exclude someone. This is what the New Testament does. And I appreciate the passion and the love you have for bringing individuals, whether Jewish or not, to a clearer understanding of God. However, you can't deny the fact that all this is in spite of the initial requirement that the New Testament lays down that you need Yeshua for salvation. And if you don't, then why do you need Yeshua? It seems that Yeshua in the picture has hurt the Jewish community overall more than it's helped it. I'm sure you're.
I'm sorry. If I may, I wanted to circle back to that whole concept, and I'm glad you mentioned it again. If you do look at in the New Testament, you'll see that there was a progression of former idol worshiping heathens, for lack of a better word, which, as you just so aptly put, Torah would give permission to exclude. Okay. By virtue of whatever it is, the miracles that they saw or heard about that Yeshua allegedly performed, whatever the reason, let's put all that aside for the moment. They wanted to come to the representatives, if you will, of those who were presenting Torah to the heathens. Now, whatever got them there, that's fine. But the point is, Paul, especially, as well as others, had to figure out a way. How do we bring this people to be grafted into Am Yisrael? How do we get them to be Torah observant, etc. And how can we do it as quickly and efficiently as possible? And what they did was, especially in Acts 15, they came up with certain immediate prerequisites. First of all, you have to abstain from drinking blood, which obviously was a ritual custom among some of the pagans. Two, you have to refrain from eating meat that has been strangled. All Torah commandments, all
Torah prohibitions, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So. And then they said, well, okay, those are the most important. And then what about the rest? And what their conclusion was is the rest of Torah they can learn and hear in the shul every Shabbat. Well, they called it the words of Moses can be heard every Shabbat. So there was a program in place for them to learn Torah. Now, where all this separation came was the usual. It got co-opted a short bit later because of the likes of Marcion and Constantine. Constantine, trying to just cement his feeble dictatorial position, sought to combine paganism and this new faith, again, whatever to call it, where many of his subjects were coming to faith in Jesus, okay, which meant that what did that entail at that point? It involved coming to the disciples who were teaching them. And what were they teaching them, and where were they sending them, and where were they leading them to? To Torah, and so it all got messed up by the zeal of crooked and evil men seeking to co-opt the original message.
Marty, it sounds like everything you just said really leads us to the conclusion that Paul failed, that his tactic and his strategy failed, that if he just would have preached Torah Judaism, this branch of Nazarene or Messianic Judaism would not have gone off. And this is why I'm really against this Noahide movement in the Orthodox world, because I really think that Paul's mission to the Gentiles was the first Noahide outreach mission, right? Just like many Orthodox Jews today offer the Noahide laws as an alternative to Torah Judaism, Paul was offering his own type of 7 laws to those who were coming into the faith, but what eventually ended up happening.
With the goal to keeping all of them, not restricting them to 7.
Right.
I agree with you on the note.
That's the same thing that Chabad teaches. But the thing is, this group got so big that it eventually broke away from Judaism and ended up persecuting Jews. So we could say that Paul failed, and his existence actually hurt the world ethically more than helped it.
Well,
I would actually say
I would counter. I'm sorry. I was going to say to that I would counter real quickly. For many years, Paul was Shaul of Tarsus, who learned at the feet of great Rabban Gamliel. How much did he accomplish in those years?
When he was a Torah Jew, right? Yeah, but this is before.
My point is, he didn't cease being a Torah observant Jew when he had his, the quote, road to Damascus experience.
I'm not attacking him. I'm attacking his mission and his strategy and how that transpired into the Holy Roman Empire and the persecution of Jews.
Well, you're right, and lay the blame at the Holy Roman Empire. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would actually say this, however. In terms of this concept, how many Christian pastors do you know, or those who teach in the seminary, can tell you what Ger Toshav, or what it is that B'nai Noach are? None. Or a very small group, very, very small, but they don't know the application of the idea. So if, you're on the outside reading a Jewish book and you're on the outside looking in, chances are whenever you get to that whole thing where that Ruach HaKodesh will lead you to all truth, and you don't know what Ruach HaKodesh is, there are all these puzzle pieces that we have to put together that are formed within that of halakha, that are formed within that of midrashim and agadah. We have to go and look at all of these things to understand the concept, in the framework in which it is. You say Holy Spirit within that of the Christian church, you're going to have 35,000 different ideas as to what exactly that is and what that entails. And that's a problem. So I think a lot of it comes down to bad education.
The Messianic movement is around 35, maybe 40 years old. It began in the late 60s. So till the late 60s, the church was Gentile, had a Gentile mentality, a Gentile agenda, at least for sure with the Catholic Church it did. It seems that the Messianic movement is taking credit for something that it's just accomplished in the last 30 years. And it's not really much. I would say the Messianic movement has actually made more converts to Orthodox Judaism than the other way around.
And that's probably true. And the thing about it is that I would say, yes, the title Messianic Judaism is actually very, very young. It was formulated in the 1960s. But I would say that the premises of it are very ancient. There were different groups with different names throughout that that whole gap. Take for instance Paul Philip Levertov, who was a born Fievel Levertov, was a Hasidic a great Hasidic scholar. Later became an Anglican priest. Why he did that, I have no clue. But when he was a Hasidic Jew, he was sitting there reading, the Gospel of John and a Hebrew manuscript of the Gospel of John. He thought he was reading about this Jewish boy named Yeshua. Another one is Rabbi Isaac Lichtenstein. Both of these guys lived in the 1800s, and he actually was one of the first people to go and translate the Zohar, as a matter of fact, and stayed within Judaism. He never, joined the Anglican Church like Paul Philip Levertov, a.k.a. Fievel Levertov, ever did.
If you really want to count the weird and silly things that born Jews do, don't forget the head of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, is a born Jew. Hugh Hefner is a born Jew. The leading atheists are born Jews: Christopher Hitchens, Carl Sagan, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. I mean, only because a Jew does it does not in any way validate that thing.
No, but they never abandoned Judaism, unlike these other individuals that you have brought up.
I would say becoming an Anglican priest is pretty much an abandonment of Judaism.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's true.
This
might have to walk that one back a little bit.
I hope this will be illustrative, but at this point, I think it might be important to briefly touch on why we wanted to do this, quote unquote, this work, the rabbinic gospels in the first place, if you'll indulge me for a moment. And what it is this separation, abject separation, that's fomented in both camps, Christendom and perhaps, Orthodox Jewry. And then it was like, okay, well, don't look in that New Testament. That has nothing to do with our people, say the Orthodox. And the Christians say, well, the Jews killed Christ, and there's our justification for, pogroms and everything else horrible that happened and continues to happen. We set out with the mindset of, what if a lot of these concepts, a lot of the idioms, a lot of the language, the flavor, just everything about the New Testament had its roots, or at least we're giving a nod or a homage to concepts from Torah. And so we said, okay, what did some of the great sages have to say, in their commentaries about, some of these Torah concepts? And more shockingly, how is it that in the New Testament, these very same ideas, idioms, concepts, precepts, etc., are put forth? And we said, well, let people see that the New Testament really may not have been all that new, vis-a-vis comparing it to Torah concepts. And so we brought and collated the ideas and writings of the sages and sort of matched them up to places in the New Testament where that's what the idea that they were trying to convey in the New Testament was. I think, Chris, you might have something to add to that.
Yeah, I do want to add, for those who are listening to this and who are interested, there's a promo code that you can put in for 10% off that is Meza 10. You put that promo code in and get 10% off. But yeah, the reason why we put this thing together is because of the fact that, when I was reading I love the Gutnick Chumash, I love the Stone Edition Tanakh, and the thing that I love about these things are the amazing amount of Jewish commentaries that help me to not formulate goofy and whacked out theology that we constantly see in the Hebrew roots in the Messianic world. Such as, aliens are fallen angels and all this stuff, that we, and all these things, because there's a lot of goofy theology out there. I mean, some people even believe the earth is flat now. And so basically what I wanted to do was to go and I was looking to see if anybody had ever done this with the Gospels, done something kind of like the Gutnick Chumash or the Stone Edition Tanakh, and done it with the Gospels. Sadly, nobody ever did, and so I approached Marty, because of his amazing editing work with the Aramaic English New Testament and Real Stars. I immediately thought of him and bringing him on board to edit up this text and to look it over and all that stuff. And he jumped aboard immediately whenever I brought it up, and so, this is what we're setting out to do with the Rabbinic Gospels. And I'm getting ready to get started on Luke here very soon, is to go and help people to read the Gospels in a Jewish limelight more so than, say, just a translation. Many people, think that a translation will do it, but however, whenever we don't get into first century understanding, halakhic understanding, and all of these things that are brought up all throughout the New Testament. I mean, we have 324 footnotes, each footnote containing probably about 3 footnotes within the Rabbinic Gospel of Mark, and that's why it's such a thick text for the shortest gospel. These are things that cannot be denied. So, it helps to bridge that gap between, the Messianics and also for that of Orthodox Judaism, I think. Because it helps Messianics to think like Orthodox Jews.
At least from a midrashic level, only because you're quoting words of the sages. Again, this notion of excluding others for either believing this individual is the Messiah or even not the Messiah at all. And we know in Perek Chelek it says that Hillel the elder teaches the Messiah is not coming anymore because it expired in the time of Cheskiyahu HaMelech. it seems that the prophets themselves or the sages themselves would not have exclude others on that basis. So like bringing out the Jewishness of the Gospels, you know what? I have no problem stating that the Gospels or the New Testament is a Jewish book. In other words, there are Jews in it, there are Jewish ideas, but only because something is Jewish, it doesn't mean that it's Torah-based. There are many ideas floating around in the Orthodox world that contradict each other. Unless it's really just an outlet to write creatively, I don't think that a Jew learning of the Jewishness of the Gospels in any way is going to bring them any closer to accept the Messiah of those Gospels. Because
we're not even marketing this to people who don't even believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. Mm-hmm. But however, a person who doesn't believe that, if they want to, to go and look at it for historical premises based upon the Peshitta text, then they may look at it in that level. There's Christians who have bought this book for the reasons of historical level. We're not telling you how to apply this thing. I use it as a halakhic document in many ways, to go and look at the parallels of halakha and how to go and fulfill them in my own life based upon my Rebbe, what it is that, he said to do, and the thing about this, if we were setting out to be divisive, like many people in our faith are, then I wouldn't have quoted Rabbi Akiva, who thought the Bar Kokhba for a while was the Messiah.
I'm not attacking the book. I'm sure it's a great book, and would like to read it. The thing is, although I don't think that a Messianic Jew has to drop Yeshua necessarily, I do believe that while remaining in the Messianic movement or in any Yeshua-based movement, it ultimately stunts your growth. And I think it's evident that there's only a certain level that one could reach in the Messianic world, and he cannot go any further. Why is that? And I've said many times that I think that it's because every lesson, every class, every shiur in the Messianic world has to begin and end with the Messiah. Everything is to justify some Messiah. And our Torah does not revolve around some Messiah, but a good God using his people to better this world through his instructions. That's what the Torah basis is. That is what the 5 books revolve around. So although I'm not trying to convert you or your listeners, I'm still in the business of thinking what's good for me is good for you. And I think that academically, there are greater heights you can reach just by embracing a Torah Judaism outlook and just even viewing Yeshua as any other rabbi. You've given many examples of Hasidim today, how they revere their Rebbe. That's fine, right? But to say that he's a Messiah and worse, to say that he's God incarnate, I think ultimately will end up catching up with you from an academic, philosophical, and Torah perspective.
Now, here's why I personally disagree. Because of the fact that, take, for instance, us putting together this text, or like organizations like First Fruits of Zion have put out the Shadows of the Messiah and the Chronicles of the Messiah, several other things, it causes them to have to be a little bit more academic because of the fact that we have to take our preconceived notions at times and then reevaluate them based upon new information that we get from Hazel, from new information that we get from studying Torah Shebiate, from things that it is that we discover through that of Jewish textual support. So it's almost like one of these things of like taking your mind and using it as a rubber band and stretching it out, to kind of, it's a real academic thing to have to go and do that in order to say, well, I may disagree with this concept, and maybe the concept's not the problem. Maybe I'm the problem, and that's, what I found myself doing a great deal of the time while working on this text, as well as...
Yeah, you can justify anything on that basis, that the concept's not the problem, but maybe I'm the problem, instead of saying, like, you know what, let's go back to the original playbook. Let's go back to Torah and see what Torah wants from us. Let's see what God tells us we must do in order to find favor in his eyes, right? Everything outside of that is secondary and commentary and ultimately disposable. In other words, it's only there, everything outside of the Torah is there to bring you back to Torah. Now, if whatever you're studying is in some way separating you from Torah, like Christianity or the New Testament has done for 2,000 years, now mind you, again, I give credit to the Messianic movement that they have brought individuals who knew nothing of Torah, who knew nothing of Rashi, who knew nothing of the Rambam, who knew nothing of the Taryag Mitzvot. Yes, they brought them in, but you know what? When those guys get serious, they ultimately end up dropping Messianic Judaism and just converting to Judaism. So I am in the business of saying what's good for me is good for you, and I really want to share the relationship I have with the Almighty with others. And if it's bringing Messianic believers to a Torah understanding, even without dropping Yeshua, that's fine. That's fine. Although Messianic Jews will not be so lenient with me, because they'll feel that although you accept me, we really can't accept you, because unlike how you believe, they believe, as the New Testament teaches, that one has to believe in Yeshua, or if not, there's no point of needing Yeshua.
Well, that's a problem or an issue in what I would hope is more of a minority than a majority. But even in the term Messianic Judaism, there's so many subsets and different sects and everything else that it's just as messy as it is anywhere else. But I agree with you that the thing that would stifle one's growth in the Messianic movement would be the same thing that stifles one in any movement, and that would be where it counts here is that they don't zealously then pursue and study Torah. That's the problem.
Any offshoot movement, I would say. I would say offshoot movement. Right. I mean, if you're on the base movement, I mean, you don't need a middle guy. You could go straight to the wholesaler to work through a middleman.
Yeah, you know what though? But I want to be faithful and acknowledge the middleman that brought me to the wholesaler. So I'm going to keep him in the mix if that's okay.
I mean, there's a lot of
that doesn't detract it from my zeal to study Torah. And the other reason, like Chris said, we're getting probably more copies of this work going out to Christians, quote unquote, than Messianics, because certain Messianics will say, I don't like the way you've rendered God's name in here, so as such, I'm throwing the entire thing out, and I'm not even going to look at it. That's how crazy some of that is. But what I take great joy in is that the Christians that are buying it are going, I've heard some of this hate, talked about the Jews and everything else, and thanks to your book and some of the lessons that you provided before the book and everything else, we see that the New Testament is so much a Jewish book, and there's so much richness that has been given to us there, thanks to the Jewish people whom we love, as a result of our studies and that kind of thing. And that, at the end of the day, that's something I could be happy for if we're getting that kind of reaction.
They'll just end up converting to Judaism, and that's typically what ends up happening.
Well, some do, some don't. I think the biggest problem is some of them in their zeal to now embrace the Hebrew roots that they didn't know existed. Then they run into well-meaning, shall we say, anti-missionaries, who take the Shema and go, look, it's easy, Hashem Eloheinu, Hashem Echad, not two. So people weak in their study and everything else can easily, say, oh, that makes sense. You're right. But there's a deeper concept that of course certain things in Kabbalah express and which we don't have time for now. But yeah, and
I've seen quite a few.
I'm not a fan of Kabbalah. I'm not a fan of the Zohar. I'm for
I'm not a huge fan.
Torah and Halacha. Torah Shebekitav and Torah Shebal Peh. With Torah Shebal Peh, I understand it as the rulings of the Sanhedrin. And anything that's found within Mishnaic literature that does not align itself with law automatically falls into the realm of Midrash and Agadah, folklore and legend, which is secondary, and it's just there to bring you back to Torah, but it's not Torah in itself, not even Torah Shebal Peh. But yeah, I mean, I've appreciated this conversation a lot, and I think it's helped a lot of people. And again, if I could bring Christian believers who believe in Yeshua to a Torah based understanding of Yeshua, then I've done a good job, because I think Torah is ultimately what's going to better this world, whether you believe Yeshua is the Messiah or not. However, of course, I would want them to embrace my form of Torah Judaism that does not include Yeshua, but I am not going to exclude them just because they happen to believe in Yeshua.
And that's wonderful. And anything that gets them to walk through the door leading to some, or where there was none, or greater depth of Torah study, ultimately, I think is a great thing.
Great.
However they get there.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now, Rabbi Meza, before we wrap up, make sure to give everybody the links to your website and all that stuff, and how they can get in contact with you and all that good stuff.
Sure. My website is bejewish.org, and I have a bunch of videos on YouTube, and I have articles online. My organization really distinguishes itself in that it's the only Orthodox organization that encourages people to consider becoming Jewish via a formal conversion. And I think that the way you make the world a better place is by spreading Torah, right? The whole idea that Jews are supposed to be
by living Torah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the idea of being a light into the nations, well, the Torah is that light. And in Mishle it says that the mitzvot are the candles.
That's right. So, being an Or Lagoyim is something that that we can all agree on.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. And Chris, as we wrap up here, I know, and I encourage everybody to take advantage of the 10% coupon code, which was once again Meza 10.
Mm-hmm. It's Meza and the number 10.
Okay, I'm not sure you ever gave the website though, so let me shamelessly plug that right now, and that was www.rabbinicgospels.org.
That's right, and the promo code is MEZA and the number 10, all one compilation of all this right there. Meza 10 is the coupon code for 10% off. And also, if they do it within the next couple of days, if they order the hardcover, they get a free ebook with it as well as 10% off. That's pretty awesome.
Such a deal.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Well, gentlemen, I've enjoyed this immensely. Rob, it was very nice talking to you, and nice that we weren't. This was actually less heated than the average discussion across the table at a yeshiva. So. So
oh yeah, we were supposed to call each other snakes and vipers as they do in the helmet.
Yeah. And knock each other's kippot to the floor, except that's kind of hard to do long distance.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom.